Hello, hello! Bl'Artagnan here with World of Illusions, Spiritus Pandemonium. We have a no CID RAINES team featuring Vaughn, Selfie, and Sellers. Before we get too deep into it, hit the like button on that video, helps me out, does me a favor, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and you enjoy the content, want to see more of it. In addition, it'll also unlock access to community posts in which I do character evaluations, which is, I don't know, a little helpful, little handy little service, but, anywho, let's get into the fight, because this is a doozy. This is a doozy of a fight, and this is the kind of thing we've been asking for. Fights with mechanics, fights with challenge, and my god, this one actually took me a little while, so I guess, be careful what you wish for. But it's okay, I'm pretty satisfied with it overall, having gotten get my arms around it, so to speak. So what do we got going on here? We got Selfie launching, because that's what she does. We have Vaughn dealing damage, because that's what he does, and we have Sellers keeping us safe, because that's what she does. You get a big-ass tree in the middle. Look at that big-ass tree. It's a big honking tree. And I'm not normally a big fan of cutting down trees, but I think this guy kind of has it coming. He has two little tree buddies on the side, little bush buddies, I guess. And they're kind of annoying because they have a pretty damaging HP attack that they do that also delays the target. Sellers is going to be tanking all of these, which is going to be a little scary at points. Especially because I kind of mismanage the Brave at different points during the fight, and they unbreak at points when it's, well, you'll see, it's pretty inconvenient. Unfortunately, the attacks are physical, so if Sellers doesn't absorb the Brave. At least not without a burst, but oof, that was scary. Dang, Sellers, be careful. So, what else we got going on here? We have Selfie here, because, well, we have Vaughn here, yeah, damage, whatever. We have Selfie here, because this fight heavily encourages launch. Shocking, I know, CID RAINES, right? The reason, though, is once we get below 60%, this big tree's going to be taking less damage from non-launch attacks. I think he also does that during force time, maybe? I forget. And once we get below 20%, he's going to be taking, like, no damage outside of launches, pretty much. Or so he thinks. We'll get there. But speaking of launches and force time and various damage things, I think we're just about ready to hop into our first force time, so Sellers, if you would just go ahead and get out of the way so Vaughn can do the honors. Sellers, of course, has a perfectly fine force weapon to use, and it probably is decent in this fight, but we do not want to use her force here. Because that first threshold we see, the 90% threshold, is the first of the mechanics we'll be facing, outside of, I guess, just the rampant HP damage this fight throws at you. It's pretty damaging. Because once we go below 90%, the tree is going to queue up a healing stance, and if it acts again before we push it below 80, it's going to heal a bunch, I think 10% of HP, which is massive. And I think it cleanses debuffs too. Might, maybe, I don't know. Can't say I let it do that, but don't let it do that. So we don't want it acting. Luckily, it delays itself when it goes into the healing stance, so you have a bit of wiggle room, but you have so many ways to prevent it from acting that you should be able to figure something out to make that not happen. However, I would recommend against using your burst phase during this part of the fight, as you'll see later. At least if you're using this team or a kind of similar team where you have the one kind of DPS-focused FR person. Anyway, I don't know if that makes sense, but you'll see. Getting some bonus damage from Sellers here, thanks to the FR getting some off-turn damage. Vaughn isn't normally an off-turn damage character, but yeah, we'll take that. And now delaying, because we definitely want him out of that 80% range, which we got, so it's perfect. Spamming Red Spiral here with Vaughn. We actually are going to be switching between the two a little bit here and there, the two attacks, for different reasons, as you'll see. I kind of like that now Red Spiral and White Whirl have kind of different use cases, because right now Red Spiral is unquestionably the better single target attack. It just has an extra HP attack, plus the refund after it. It's just a better attack. If Vaughn didn't cap his refunds as easily, maybe that wouldn't be the case, but he does, so there we are. Can go ahead and finish off. Ooh, a spinning edge. You love to see that. Dang, yeah. Sellers hitting with that hard-hitting single-target EX. Boom. 13 million damage? Nice. Tanky boy. 200 million HP. That's a lot. Plus his allies absorbing your AoE attacks. He gets them back once you go below 60%. And that's kind of important, as you're going to see. It's sort of good that they're back in a weird sort of way. Maybe not good. Good's the wrong way to put it. But he's gone ahead and used his force attack. The force attack is 10 turns long, as you can see. It's a big ol' hit that applies 2 debuffs, a max Brave down, looks like, and on Selfie you can see the HP damage down that I was really hoping to avoid. Luckily, Selfie, has that debuff evasion and kept it off Sellers and Vaughn, which was the important piece. Selfie, whatever, we don't need her to be dealing HP damage. But the other two, it's really important that they keep their HP damage up. So thanks, Selfie. We appreciate that. Aerith also is quite good here for that reason. The other parts of this are, we use the Seymour call there to delay, and also to dispel the HP damage up buff that it gave itself. Because we don't want it dealing too much HP damage. Celes is already tanking hits from its little buddies. We don't want to have to, you know, deal with that. But for now, we're just kind of charging up that force gauge. We're not using the selfie charge, though, because we actually do want to be dealing damage here. We want as much of the force time as possible to be in the back end of the fight to the best of our ability. It's a tanky fight, and it's very important that we kill within the force time just because of how the last 20% of this fight goes. Oh yeah, it hardens its defenses too, which is something we haven't seen in a while, and I'm glad to see it back. Basically, if you act 10 turns in a row, post 60%, it becomes invincible. And the only way to let it not be invincible is to let it act. So, well, you know, that's how it's going to be. Granted, if you're trying to do some crazy no boss turn strategy, it doesn't count the turns in summon. I think it might count the turns in burst phase, but I haven't tested that. It's a maybe. Probably not. Doesn't make sense, but just something to work with if you're trying to do something really fancy and aggressive. Not like us. We're being pretty defensive with this team. Celes is here keeping us plenty safe. We're being very patient with Vaughn. We're using Pyroclasm here, because Pyroclasm is it's kind of overlooked, I think, in Vaughn's kit, because his EX was bad for so long, and his base skills are so good. You also, of course, don't want to press his EX in Force Time, but outside of Force Time, it's good, because it's kind of the best of both worlds in that it's the same number of HP attacks as Red Spiral, but it actually splashes twice, so it does as much splash, if not more, as White World does. And we want splash damage here, because another mechanic of the fight, another piece of it, is if you can kill his little bush buddies now that they're here, after they come back at 60%, he loses he gains a, how do you put it? He takes more HP damage. He loses HP damage resistance, I guess is the way you'd say it. Which is really handy because, again, he takes reduced non-launch damage, and that's going to be going up even more later, so we need all the help we can get. So we want to be dealing some chip damage to the little bush buddies to help us push through the 20% mark. This fight is heavily skewed toward RAINES, mainly because of the final 20%. Because once you get to 20%, it frames its turn, so the only way to prevent it from acting is, like turn manipulation, RAINES kind of pulling stuff. And it gets massive non-launch damage resistance, and it's kind of annoying because it applies to the attack that does the launch as well. It's only aerial attacks. So, it doesn't matter how big the hit is on the ground, it's going to resist it and take very little damage, if any. But if it's in the air, RAINES with his massive burst attack jump kicks, that's how you're kind of expected to close this out. That was kind of unnecessary of me. We've gone ahead and activated the Celes BT now, so that hopefully we don't die to these side dudes. And we're now ready, I think. I'm kind of unsure about how to play this at this point, because I was planning originally to use Celes FR, use 3 FRs, use Celes to get 20% and finish off with Vaughn. I wasn't sure if he'd be able to get the job done from 50%. So we're going to go ahead and burst now. Kind of get ourselves into position, because at this point, I know I said I was going to use Celes, but I think the time is now. So, nice 2 million damage. You hope to see that. Excuse me, refreshing Seymour, getting some free damage from his follow-up. Thanks, Seymour. We now have 2 burst effects on the field, so our HP damage cap is gigantic. Getting a final Rapture before we go into business. And we actually get really lucky here, because you see Selfie, for whatever reason, is acting after Vaughn's second turn. Don't know how it happened, but I'm not complaining. So we're going to go ahead and use Luna Freya here and not use the Force. Because I'm doing some calculations here. I'm thinking, okay, how many turns? We want to make sure that, in this case, we're entering the burst phase at 8 on the Force time. So we're going to go ahead and use an LD to get more splash damage on the little dudes on the side, as I mentioned, because we want them dead relatively soon, so that the big guy starts taking more HP damage. So the AoE from the LD is a pretty handy way to do that. And unfortunately, he's hardened again, and I thought to myself, oops, run over, I goofed it up again. Oh, whatever. Okay, well, luckily, for whatever reason, the dude moved his turn up in front of Vaughn, so this is actually perfect. So with Celes, we're going to go ahead and finish the other of his little buddies. There we go. And as you can see, we are rewarded with increased HP damage to the dude. And that's actually lucky, because we could have missed the HP requirement if that guy did a bunch of damage to Celas then. I don't think he would have because of the whole Brave Absorb thing, but I'm glad he missed. That was part of why we were using White Whirl there, is just to give Celas a little bit less pressure. We're now in the Von Burst. It's time to go a-killin'. The strategy, if you're not bringing Rains to deal with this fight, specifically the post 20% mark, is to just bring an absolute metric butt-ton of HP damage. And between Celas' BT, between Selfie, between, what's his name? Shoot, I'm blanking. A Seymour Call, and Kurasame Call, and then Vaughn, of course, himself just brings a giant pile of HP damage. We're going to be able to chew through that giant resistance he now has, because you can see here, we're still pretty much capping our hits, because Vaughn just does that much damage. And we have so much HP damage in play here, which is great, because otherwise this was going to be a really difficult time. However, it was important, I think, to time it, like I said, with 8 on the burst, because we're going to be cutting it very close here, as you're going to see. And we want that true damage from Brothers to finish him off, because otherwise we're out of luck, you know, that's it, no force. So here we go. Brothers Summon, can it do the job? 3%? Yes, it can. There we go. Pandemonium Spiritus. What a fight. Goodness, I'm kind of surprised I was able to clear this with Rains. It was not easy. Without Rains, I should say. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Adios.